Alrighty, good evening, everyone. This is meteorologist Timmy Albertson here with you guys for tonight's weather chat. We are still tracking some kind of below average temperatures across a good portion of the country. We also have another system that's making its way through parts of the Midwest. And then on the backside of that, we could be seeing some decent lake effect snow across the usual snow belt areas and maybe even some slightly unusual snow belt areas. And by that, I mean not quite as common. Not unusual, but not quite as common. All right, let's go ahead and as always, we're going to take a look at our good friend, the surface weather map here. Let's take a look at what is going on. We have our area of high pressure that we've been talking about starting to move its way out of Canada, and now it's tracking its way into the Montana area. This area of high pressure is going to continue to push its way south eastwards as we go over the next couple of days. Now, it does look like that colder air has kind of managed to force itself a little bit over some of the mountains there. So we've seen that frontal boundary kind of back off just a little bit, but overall, still kind of the same setup. This area of high pressure is going to generally track its way down to the south and to the east. Meanwhile, we have this little we have some moisture that's kind of caught up right ahead of this area of high pressure here, and that's producing some light snow across parts of South Dakota, going back into southern Minnesota and into Iowa. They do have some winter weather advisories that are in effect there. We're also seeing some minor areas of some blowing and drifting snow back further off towards the north and to the west, where that system had kind of been earlier on today. But really, what's going to happen is as this disturbance kind of tracks its way to the east, it's actually going to start interacting with this area of low pressure we see down around the Ozarks. Now, this area of low pressure, while it will intensify, will probably not be quite as strong as some of the low pressures we've seen over the past couple of weeks. But for the most part, it'll be enough to kind of get the job done. And preceding this low pressure is actually a little bit in the way of some moisture, producing some light snow and even some wintry mixed precipitation across parts of southern Kentucky, going into parts of northern Tennessee, and then even some areas of fog, just given the way the setup is. Now, what we're going to be seeing with this system is that it will intensify a little bit, but then it's going to kind of pull its way off towards the east. So while it might bring at least a little bit of snow across parts of eastern Pennsylvania, the main thing with this is going to be when it intensifies as it moves off the coast, and that's really going to allow those winds to kind of change their direction and maybe produce a decent lake effect snow event across some parts of the snow belt. So with that in mind, let's take a look here, of course, at the surface weather or the current radar here. We'll take a look at what's going on. So, as mentioned, winter weather advisories stretch all the way from Montana, going back down over towards the Chicago area. You can see this little ribbon here. That was kind of the path that that disturbance took earlier today. Now, this winter weather advisory remains in effect because, again, there will probably be at least a little bit of blowing snow, and that could, at least keep things a little bit slick and slippery out there across parts of South Dakota, going back into North Dakota. But right now, where we're mainly seeing that snow is down across Iowa and even some parts of Nebraska still ongoing. We then see that winter weather advisory continues its way into the Chicago area. Again, it's that same little disturbance pushing its way through, and then it'll track its way across northern Ohio and northern Indiana, producing some light snowfall there. But if we zoom in a little bit, we can see that there are some winter storm warnings that are in effect that go from Benton Harbor down to South Bend, all the way over into parts just to the south there of Michigan City, heading over towards Plymouth area. And I believe Valparaiso, nope, is still under that winter storm watch. So we have this winter storm warning that's in effect here. We also have a winter storm warning that's in effect for pretty much all along I-90, going from Erie County, Ohio, to Erie County, Pennsylvania. I know it's always a little bit trippy, and to make it even trippier, this is Erie County, New York. Now, anyways, that winter storm warning is in effect because there is going to be the good possibility, as mentioned, of some lake effect snow, especially when the winds begin to shift later on. Winter storm warning across the higher elevations, going all the way from about Johnstown, south of Johnstown, Legionnaire, all the way to Somerset, going back into Garrett County, Maryland. We talked about that area yesterday and kind of the unique thing about their geography there and why we see this kind of sharp cutoff right around here. Again, elevation really increases once you get to this area. Winter storm warnings also in effect going back down into the Clarksburg area, heading all the way over to Elkins. Again, still in those, still within that kind of higher elevation stretch there, and heading even all the way down to parts just around the Bluefield, Virginia area, and even some parts of coal country there in Kentucky around the Pikeville area. So again, this is all going to be because of elevation. It's going to get some enhancement from the fact that the elevation really just kind of jumps up around this whole area there, so that that air is getting not only pushed in, but then it's getting lifted up and over that, causes it to kind of cool and condense and produces, again, some heavier snowfall. We see that again a lot of times on the West Coast when we see those winter storms going into California and parts of Oregon. In this case, we can also have it here on this part of the Appalachian Mountains. Winter storm warnings also up around the Philadelphia area. Again, it's going to be for that kind of when this that whole area of low pressure really begins to intensify. Again, as mentioned, could produce some snowfall there before moving off the coast there. So not necessarily looking like it's going to be a big New England nor'easter, but still might be at least a little bit of snowfall around the Philadelphia area. In the meantime, kind of as a precursor, we do have a little bit of lake effect snow going on around parts of the Buffalo area. Winds are actually coming out of the southwest right now, and they are cold enough that it's still going over some of that warmer lake water and producing at least kind of some light lake effect snow here. We do have this little special weather statement that is in effect, and again, kind of, more or less not a big lake effect snow event, but, enough to maybe, add an inch or so here and there, wherever that band does set up. We also had kind of a nicer one earlier up around the Watertown area in New York. Again, over Lake Ontario. You can see this is a little bit better of a defined, kind of lake effect snow bands here, but overall not necessarily as heavy as we could see them. So let's take a look here at our good friend, the forecast map here, and we're going to take, or at least one of our little models here, and we're going to take a kind of a little bit of a look at what's going to be happening here. So let's go ahead and back this thing up to right now. There's that little disturbance. Again, that little just moisture kind of trapped in there, getting forced out by that area of high pressure. Here's our little area of low pressure over across, right now, it's down around parts of East Texas with a little secondary low around the Ozarks. But overall, this is kind of that little area of low pressure. As we go through the overnight tonight, you can see how that as that disturbance begins to kind of push its way into Illinois, we're going to see this area of low pressure start to really kind of feed off the colder air that's coming in from that high pressure. And you can see this low pressure becomes better defined. Not only that, but we're going to have this other little secondary low pressure that's going to try to make its way off the East Coast. Eventually, as that high pressure really begins to exert its influence, and colder air really begins to interact, and we're going to see kind of that little smaller area of low pressure eventually work in conjunction with this much stronger area of low pressure just off the coast there. And you can see how that's going to track its way right off into the open waters, but still enough of that disturbance from that initial low pressure to produce some snowfall there. So let's talk about the winds here and what we're going to be seeing. So let's see here if we can't get this a little bit better here. So let's take a look at some wind plots here. And basically what you're looking at, these little arrows are telling you the direction that the winds are going. So you kind of follow it along with your eyes there. And you see there, of course, there's the frontal boundary, there's the low pressure. So as we move our way forward, though, take a look here at what happens. Notice how those winds suddenly just really increase. They become northwesterly as we go into the day tomorrow, really kind of begin to increase. We're talking probably wind gusts here easily over 30 miles an hour, maybe even getting kind of close to 35 and 40 miles an hour, especially coming right off the lake here. Now, that colder air has a good amount of time to stay over the open waters of Lake Michigan. And again, the more time when it comes to lake effect snow, the more time we see that wind traveling over the water. So again, if it goes kind of the long way through the lake, that will really help to enhance those lake effect snow bands. Typically, when it comes to Lake Michigan, the predominant times the winds are generally west or northwesterly, and so it normally affects places like Grand Rapids, Michigan, and they get kind of you don't get lake effect snow, but it's not necessarily as organized as it could be, but still enough to kind of get the job done. But when we see the winds coming more northwesterly or even more northerly going over Lake Michigan, that puts places like Valparaiso, Michigan City, that puts those places under, really good position for seeing kind of a singular heavy snowfall band to kind of set up across the area. So those heavier snowfall bands, again, are the ones that will produce some decent snowfall accumulations. Now, mind you, you can get decent snowfall accumulations with, kind of that scattered stuff more or less, and those events tend to last a little bit longer. But meteorologically aside here, going into the specifics of it, that's kind of at least a little bit of a setup of what's going to be going on. Now, meanwhile, let's take a look here over at Lake Erie. As we go into the day tomorrow, the winds are going to be coming straight out of the north. Right? So it's not going over the long part of the lake, but it is still going over the lake. And that's why we see places like Sandusky, Ohio, going back into Lorain, Elyria, Cleveland, heading up towards Ashtabula, and then into Erie with those winter storm warnings. So even though it's not going to be one singular band, it'll be kind of enough of a lake effect snow event, more or less, to give them some decent snowfall totals or, for lake effect snow, I guess I should say. So as we go our way through the day Friday, you can see those winds really increase. And then take a look here. The wind becomes a little bit slightly more northwesterly, and that's going to put places like Michigan City going up to maybe Benton Harbor pretty much right in the setup there for that really good lake effect snow. Now, if the winds do shift a little bit, that lake effect snow band could migrate backwards a little bit going towards Valparaiso. So that's why they've still got that winter storm watch that's in effect because we'll just kind of have to wait and see how that plays out. Meanwhile, those winds continue to increase going off of Lake Erie and also even across parts of Lake Superior. They'll be getting some lake effect snow too. You see how that wind really is rushing across parts of the northern plains. Again, that's going to lead to some of that blowing and drifting snow. Maybe not enough to be a blizzard, but certainly enough that it's still going to keep things pretty slick and very slippery out there in some parts, especially if you've ever been out around this area. There's not a lot of trees, folks. It's just pretty flat. Well, actually, it's not technically flat. It does actually incline slightly going towards the Rocky Mountains. It's part of the reason why we get dry lines. But with that aside, though, nothing really much to stop those winds there. So again, certainly some blowing snow going to be kind of a thing, going to make it a little hard to keep some of those roadways clear. Again, as we head our way into Friday night, you can see that wind continues. It does back off though a little bit as we go into late Friday night and heading into the day on Saturday. We see that wind is still going to be ongoing though, may even be increasing across parts of Lake Erie, going back out across parts of Lake Ontario. So again, that'll continue that lake effect snow event in that region. Maybe even kind of bring those higher snowfall totals that are up around this part here of Lake Erie, are just off the coast, I guess I should say, of Lake Erie. And there is our high pressure. You can see that thing is really dominant. You can see, again, as mentioned, the wind flow around an area of high pressure is clockwise. So you can kind of follow along with your eyes on how that's going to be setting up. So let's go ahead and go forward through the rest of the weekend. Eventually, as we go into Saturday evening, those winds do begin to calm down. And then we're going to see them changing probably just enough that we're probably going to see that lake effect snow event coming to an end by the time we get towards Saturday night, though there could still be some lake enhanced flurries. But take a look what happens on the backside of that high pressure, though. Those winds become southerly. We are actually going to be seeing some upper level ridging taking place here. Whoops, that's the wrong one. That's still the wrong one. There we go. All right. Take a look here. As we go our way towards the end of the weekend, we can see this upper level ridge begin to set up. And so we are probably going to see somewhat of a return of some above average temperatures, maybe not quite as above average as what we saw in December, but still a little bit more mild than usual out across parts of the upper Midwest. And then we'll have to see what this little disturbance thing here does. But otherwise, that's kind of a little bit of the meteorological setup here of what we're going to be seeing. So again, doesn't have to be a strong low pressure, but that high pressure is certainly enough to get the job done. And that high pressure is really going to be helping going to be kind of the main factor as to why we're going to be seeing that lake effect snow because it's going to be predominantly controlling the winds. All right, somewhat of a not meteorologically explanation, but simplified it down. All right, let's take a look here. We talked about the fact that they were seeing some colder temperatures out across parts of the deep south over the past couple of days. Let's take a look at how they did that that high pressure, the original high pressure. I guess I should point out here. Let's go back to our weather map really quickly. This was the culprit of the really below average temperatures they saw across the deep south last night, and even more so the night before. It's now made its way off to the Atlantic coast there, and still impact, still a little bit of an effect there. Still kind of at this little ridge here of high pressure that extends, but overall it's mainly moved off. Let's see how they did in parts of Atlanta this morning. We go over towards the Atlanta, Georgia area. Take a look here. They got down to 24 degrees. Not quite the record low value, though, of 10 degrees there, but still chilly. Overall, today they were about 7 degrees below average. Let's go over to Athens, Georgia. They averaged about 10 degrees below average. This morning, their low temperature was 20. The record low, though, is 13 degrees. They did not reach that. But let's go over to Columbus, Georgia. Record low 16, low of 22 degrees. They averaged 10 degrees below average today. And let's go on down to Macon, Georgia. They just missed the record by 1 degree, at least tying the record by 1 degree. They got down to 17 degrees this morning, and the record is 16 degrees. That was set back in 76, and then again back in 2003. Other places did see temperatures down into the teens. Carterville got down to 18 degrees. DeKalb County Peachtree Airport got down to 18 degrees, and then the Fulton County Airport, not Atlanta's, but Fulton County's airport, which Atlanta is in Fulton County, but it's the other airport. 19 degrees is what they got down to there. Gainesville got down to 22 degrees. And Peachtree City, which is near Atlanta, got down to 16 degrees. And Rome, Georgia, got down to 15 degrees this morning. Again, very below average temperatures. Now, while those low temperatures are about 15, 20 degrees below average, their temperatures did go up into the 50s today. That high pressure, again, moved off towards the east, kind of allowed for a little bit of a southerly wind, or at least somewhat of a southerly wind to come in and kind of return some of that more seasonable temperatures back into their area. Their high temperature today in Rome was only 2 degrees below average, even though the low temperature was almost 20 degrees below average. So just kind of gives you an idea of how those things work. Let's take a little bit of a look here. We're going to back up towards, we'll go back up to Atlanta and just see how they did with the month and kind of give you an idea of how that area of high pressure really made its impact known. Take a look here. This is going up uh, over the past month here, or so far for the month of January. They've been running a little bit below average over, the start of the month. Not too much though. I mean, all things considered, it's been pretty much right at average, slightly below average for most of the month of January. But then came that high pressure, and take a look. Yesterday, they averaged 18 degrees below average. All right, that's pretty good. But not quite as extreme as what we saw over in Mississippi yesterday. So let's see if we can't get a little bit of a look here over at the Jackson area. We were talking about them yesterday. Let's see how they did today. They got down to 26 degrees, still below average, but not quite as below average as it was. So let's take a look at the Jackson monthly here, give you guys kind of an idea of just how strong that high pressure was that moved over the past couple of days. Now, as mentioned, there were some records tied, but it looks like for the most part, it just fell shy in a lot of places of actually reaching a record. But some places it did actually set records. So depending upon where you were. Again, let's take a look here. Throughout much of the month of January here, they've been running below average. In fact, they started out the month. This is Jackson, Mississippi. They started out the month easily 5 to 10 degrees below average, and then it kind of leveled off a little bit, but still just slightly below average. They had 2 days of above average temperatures. On the 11th, it got up to 70 degrees. On the 12th, it got up to 68 degrees. But then that high pressure moved in, and on the 14th, they were 10 degrees below average, 23 degrees below average on the 15th, almost 30 degrees below average on the 16th, and yesterday they were about 23 degrees below average again. So that's pretty impressive. Right now, for the month of January, Jackson, Mississippi is averaging 7.2 degrees below zero, or 7.2 degrees below average. That is what they're averaging. And kind of give you an idea of what that looks like. The average high so far for this month has been 51 degrees. The average low has been 29. So again, a little bit obviously below zero, or below average. Wow, I don't know why I keep saying that. Let's take a look up at Meridian, Mississippi. How they've been doing. Again, that high pressure rolled over them too. They only, but they were not quite as below average, and part of the reason for that is, geography. Greenville, Mississippi. Take a look here. Again, running below average. They got pretty good over the past 3 days or so. They're running about almost 6 degrees below average now for the month of January. Mind you, we still have a couple. We still have what, at least what, 12 days left of January. So that could easily change. And let's take a look at the Vicksburg area. Look at that. They're right now running about almost 8 degrees below average. They got down. I mean, they were pretty good. That gives you an idea here of that high pressure. Now, again, this area had been running below average as it was. All right, not insanely below average, but enough. I mean, we're talking first couple days was about 5 to 10 degrees below average, and then again on the fifth, and then it kind of leveled off a little bit, even went above average a little bit on the 11th and 12th, but then really took a drop down as that area of high pressure made its way in. So overall, pretty interesting there. You can kind of see the impact of that high pressure, at least when it comes to the climatological normals. Very impressive, nonetheless. So overall, that's at least parts of the Deep South with that colder weather. All righty, everyone. Well, that does it for us for tonight. Back tomorrow evening, we're going to take a look at that lake effect snow if it's still ongoing. Hopefully, it will be. But if nothing else, we'll certainly be getting some good lake effect snow, especially across Lake Michigan going into later tonight, going into more so probably today tomorrow, and then across Lake Erie probably more so late tomorrow, and then going more so into tomorrow night. Overall, it'll be pretty interesting. So we'll take a look at all that and everything else. I hope you all have a good rest of your evening, everyone. Look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow evening. Until then, keep enjoying that weather.